The gravel crunched under his boots as Isaac Thorne stepped down from the cab of his truck, the dust of the ridge swirling around him like smoke from a forgotten fire. The land stretched wide and wild, untouched for what looked like decades, hills rolling into dense pine. The house just a faint smudge on the horizon. It was supposed to be abandoned. That's what the deed said. What the lawyer said. What the real estate agent, half-drunk and overconfident, had chuckled about on the phone. Nobody's lived up there in years. But now, standing at the edge of the property, Isaac knew they'd been wrong. The house wasn't a smudge. It was a fortress. Whitewashed planks held together with stubbornness and something older. Tall windows watched him like eyes. Smoke rose from the stone chimney. And on the porch, 5 figures stood in total stillness. They weren't waving. They weren't smiling. They weren't surprised. They looked like they had been waiting a long time. He squinted. Women. All of them. But not ordinary women. Taller than seemed right, broad in the shoulders, thick in the arms, sun-hardened like living statues. The one in front crossed her arms and tilted her head, sizing him up like she was measuring more than just his height. The breeze shifted, and her long copper hair danced like flame around her face. Her mouth moved. Isaac couldn't hear the words. He forced himself to walk, the deed folded in his back pocket like a talisman. Every step closer felt heavier. He tried to rationalize it, maybe squatters, maybe caretakers, but deep down, he knew that wasn't it. Something about their stillness, the precision of their arrangement, the way none of them blinked. This wasn't a surprise visit. This was a ceremony. When he reached the porch, the lead woman descended the steps with slow, deliberate grace. Her shadow fell across his chest like a curtain. "You must be the heir," she said. Her voice was rich, low, almost amused. "Isaac Thorne. Your grandfather was a liar, but at least he had taste." Isaac's mouth dried. "This land was left to me. I've got the documents." She didn't look at the papers. She didn't even glance at the house behind her. "We know," she said. "We've read them." Another woman stepped forward, darker skin, eyes like polished obsidian, hands still dirty from digging. "We've been here since before the documents, since before the Thorne name meant anything." "Then what do you want from me?" Isaac asked. He tried to sound firm. It came out like a whisper. The third woman, blonde, scarred, eyes as cold as stone, smiled for the first time. "You." The word hit him like a gust of wind in the ribs. "We'll explain everything," the redhead said, stepping aside to gesture toward the open door behind her. The other 2 women on the porch, silent until now, nodded slowly. Isaac looked past them, into the shadows of the home that wasn't supposed to exist, toward the smell of cooking herbs and burning pine. He could walk away. The truck still rumbled behind him, but somehow, he knew that if he turned back now, it wouldn't save him. He stepped inside, and the door closed. The door didn't slam, but it closed with the finality of something ancient, the kind of sound that said, "You're not leaving the same way you came." Isaac stood in the threshold, eyes adjusting to the dusky amber light inside the house. It smelled of dried sage, wet soil, and something faintly metallic. The air was warmer than it should have been, almost humid, as if the very walls exhaled when he crossed them. The 5 women entered behind him, moving without speaking, as though they'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Isaac's boots felt too loud on the hardwood floor. The redhead, the one who had first spoken, walked past him, brushed her hand along the wall, and lights flickered on, casting long shadows. "We should introduce ourselves properly," she said, turning to face him fully. "I'm Wren, the oldest. This house is mine." "The house?" Isaac asked, trying to inject disbelief into his voice. "It's my name on the deed." Wren smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Paper doesn't mean much out here, Isaac. Blood does." Before he could reply, the others stepped forward. "I'm Solveig," said the dark-skinned woman with the digging hands. Her voice was deep, musical. "I grow the food, keep the roots talking." "Mara," said the scarred blonde. "I protect the ridge. Wolves listen to me more than men do." The fourth was softer in appearance, willowy but no less tall, her eyes a shade of gray that made Isaac feel cold inside. "Echo," she said, barely audible. "I remember what the land forgets." The last woman stepped forward slowly, taller than all the others, hair silver despite her youth. Her eyes never left Isaac's. "Blythe," she said. "I keep time." "What does that mean?" Isaac asked. "You'll understand," Blythe replied, "when it's too late not to." He scanned their faces, looking for some sign of a joke, some cue that this was just some eccentric family trying to scare off the new owner. But there was nothing humorous in their expressions, only certainty. You were expected, Mara said, walking to the kitchen. She retrieved a folded piece of parchment from a drawer and laid it on the table like a relic. Your grandfather made arrangements before he passed. My grandfather died when I was 13. He never mentioned this place, because he knew you'd come looking, Echo murmured. Men always come looking when they lose their anchor. Isaac flinched. She wasn't wrong. He had no anchor anymore. No wife, no job, no city that wanted him. This land had been the last card in a busted deck. Wren sat down at the table and gestured for him to do the same. We'll give you the night to settle. We won't force anything. Not yet. Force what? Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer. You'll see. The others filtered out, one by one, each disappearing down separate hallways like ghosts into their rooms. Only Echo remained, hovering at the base of the staircase. You really don't know why you're here, do you? She asked softly. Isaac didn't answer. She nodded. You will. Then she vanished upstairs, and Isaac was left alone with the contract, the silence, and the creeping sense that the Sisters of the Ridge had just begun to unearth something buried deep inside him. Isaac didn't sleep. Not in the guest room they'd given him. Not with the old iron bed creaking at the slightest shift of weight. Not with the way the wind seemed to whisper names he hadn't told them. He lay on his back staring at the cracked ceiling. The contract they'd shown him burned into his thoughts like a brand. At dawn, he was already dressed. The air was still, unnaturally so, like the forest was holding its breath. He made his way downstairs, where Wren was already at the table, sipping from a steaming cup of something dark and bitter. The parchment contract lay between them, exactly where it had been left the night before. Morning, she said without looking up. I didn't sign that, he said. No, Wren replied. But your blood did. The absurdity of the statement struck him like a slap. He reached forward, grabbed the paper, and scanned the looping ink. The handwriting was undeniably old. His grandfather's name, Silas Thorne, sat at the bottom in jagged black strokes. It was dated over 50 years ago. The signature was witnessed, notarized, stamped. He read aloud. All future inheritors of the Thorn Ridge agree to fulfill the binding pact with the Sisters of the Land, in exchange for continued fertility of the soil and safe passage through the winter months. Isaac looked up. What the hell does that mean? It means, Wren said, finally meeting his eyes. Your grandfather promised us a bloodline, and when he ran, he left the promise hanging in the air. You just happened to catch it. I don't owe you anything, Isaac said. I didn't make this deal. Solveig appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. Doesn't matter. You stepped onto the land. That's enough. That's not how contracts work. Mara entered next, dragging a large sack of grain across the floor with one hand. This isn't the city. Nothing here works the way you think it does. Wren pushed the paper toward him. He made the deal to save his own crops. We kept our end. For decades. This land stayed alive long after the surrounding ridges turned to dust. It's why your father's family kept the property in secret, even when they didn't want it. They knew it was different. Sacred. Isaac's breath caught. His father had spoken about this place once, drunk and angry. Called it a cursed hill crawling with ghosts and debts that don't die. At the time, Isaac thought it was just bitterness. Now it felt like a warning he had ignored. You don't believe in the pact, Blythe said from the stairwell, her voice quiet but cutting. That's fine. Most men don't. Until the snow comes early. Isaac stood. This is madness. Then go, Wren said simply, not moving. Take your truck. Leave. But you won't make it down the pass. He moved toward the door, his hand brushing the knob. Behind him, Echo spoke softly, like a prayer. Your grandfather tried to leave too. Isaac stopped. He made it 10 miles, she said. They found him curled under a tree, frozen, eyes wide open. And do you know what his last words were? Isaac turned, shaken. They were right. Silence fell. And in that silence, the contract still waited, patient and permanent, like it knew it would be signed. He didn't touch the contract again. Not that morning, not through the strange breakfast Solveig laid out, bread like stone, eggs too orange, honey that tasted faintly of wildflowers he couldn't name. The sisters moved around him like orbiting moons, each with her own rhythm, her own weight. Wren watched him from the window seat, one leg curled beneath her, reading a book with no title. Mara sharpened blades that didn't look like kitchen tools. Blythe hummed to herself while dragging a branch of cedar through every room, trailing smoke. It wasn't until after lunch, when the sun stood still over the ridge, that Wren finally said it. We want your children. The words dropped into the air like stones into a still lake, rippled outward, touched everything. Isaac stared. Excuse me? You heard her, Mara said. She didn't look up from the axe she was oiling. "You're not here to plow the fields. You're here to plant something else." Echo stood near the back door, watching birds. "The land needs heirs, Isaac. New life, new breath. We're running out of time." Isaac swallowed. "You're talking about repopulating?" "We're talking about survival," Solveig said. "And tradition." He laughed once. It sounded hollow. "You want kids. That's what this is about. You want 5 babies from me?" "Not 5, Blythe said. "More. Ideally." Isaac's body locked up. "That's insane." "No," Wren replied calmly. "What's insane is thinking land this rich stays fertile on its own. You think the soil just obeys?" Isaac backed away from the table, his chair legs scraping the floor. "This isn't a farm. It's a cult. That word doesn't scare us," Echo said softly. He moved toward the door again. Mara stood, fast and quiet, and was in front of it before he even realized. "You're free to leave, but only once you've heard everything." Isaac looked around the room. 5 women, all staring now, and none of them looked crazy. They looked serious, devoted, resolute. Solveig pulled a small carved box from the mantel and opened it. Inside was a bundle of aged papers and yellowed photographs. She laid one in front of him. A man, shirtless and grinning, surrounded by the same 5 women. "That's Jacob Price," she said. "He was here before you, about 20 years ago." Isaac's throat tightened. "And what happened to him?" Wren answered. "He stayed, for a time, gave us 2 sons, but his heart wasn't strong." "Meaning?" Echo's voice. "He died." Blythe leaned forward. "We don't want your body. Not permanently, but we need your blood. Your lineage. Your seed." He couldn't speak. Wren rose slowly and walked toward him. "You're the one, Isaac. We waited. We called. And you came. So now, we ask." She stopped inches from him, eyes level with his, voice low and certain. "Will you give us what your name owes?" The house was silent. He didn't answer, but he didn't walk out the door either. He needed air. That's what he told them. That's what he told himself. Isaac pushed through the back door and into the fields without waiting for permission, even though it felt like he should have asked for it. The air hit his lungs like he hadn't breathed in years, clean, sharp, ancient. But the further he walked from the house, the more he noticed things that didn't sit right. The first was the garden. Rows of vegetables too vibrant for this time of year. Beans curling up trellises that hadn't been built with modern tools. Vines that shimmered faintly in the sun, like they had skin. The earth didn't smell like dirt, it smelled like skin warmed by fire. Beyond the garden was a shed. Its door hung slightly ajar, swaying with the wind that had started to rise. Isaac looked back. No one followed. He stepped inside. Dust filled his throat. Light filtered through slats in thin, golden beams. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust. When they did, he found what looked like a pile of old tools. But not tools, not really. Belts. A leather jacket with initials scorched into the back. A duffel bag half-zipped, a razor inside. A pair of boots, still laced, toes worn down from work. He stepped closer. A notebook peeked out from beneath a folded blanket. The name scrawled on the inside cover. Simon W. Greer. He didn't recognize the name. But the dates listed beside it stopped him cold. Arrived. August 1987. Departed unknown. He flipped to the next page. A single sentence in shaky handwriting. "I can't tell if I'm loved here or harvested." Isaac stumbled back. The boots, the bag, the jacket, all untouched, like someone had taken them off for a nap and never come back. Behind the shed, he found something else. A marker stone. Rough. Weathered. No name. No date. Just a ridge of stones laid in a careful circle. He felt it in his gut before he confirmed it with his hands. The ground was soft beneath. He'd found a grave. "What did you expect?" The voice behind him was Mara's. Her tone wasn't unkind, just inevitable. He turned. "Is this his?" She nodded. He didn't want to stay, so he tried to leave. "But when the ridge chooses you..." She trailed off, crouching beside the stone. "It doesn't let go easy." Isaac's voice cracked. "You killed him?" "No," she said. "We gave him every chance. But some men can't carry the weight of this place. They break under it. Some run, some rot. Others..." She paused. "Others become something greater." He shook his head. "You make it sound holy. It's not. It's possession." She didn't argue, just placed a hand on the stone. "You're still here, aren't you?" Isaac looked at the grave one last time. Then at the house, glowing gold in the late afternoon sun. He thought of the contract, the photograph, The names in the margins. How many had there been? And why was he starting to feel more curious than afraid? He didn't go back inside right away. Not after the grave. Not after the notebook. He sat on the edge of a half-rotted fence post, watching the wind ripple through tall grass that had no business being this green in September. He'd come here for silence, for land, for solitude. Instead, he'd found something breathing beneath the soil, a sound behind him, bare feet against the ground. Not urgent, not hidden, just soft. He turned. Echo stood a few paces away, arms folded loosely across her chest. Her hair drifted in the wind like something underwater. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said. "You didn't." He meant it. Her presence didn't feel like the others. She didn't press, didn't manipulate. She just watched, like the land did. Echo stepped closer, her gaze flicking down to the book in his hand, Simon Greer's journal. She nodded once, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. "He tried to leave," she said quietly. "I figured that out. And you're wondering if you'll end up like him." Isaac didn't answer. Echo lowered herself onto the fence beside him, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. "You're different," she said. "I've watched the way you carry things. Your eyes don't wander. You don't posture. You're not running from something. You're empty." He stiffened. "Thanks. I didn't mean it as an insult." He turned to her. "Then what did you mean?" "I mean," she said, "you're ready to be filled." He stared at her, unsure whether he should feel insulted or seduced. Echo didn't look away. Her gray eyes were storm clouds wrapped in smoke. She raised one hand slowly and placed it over his, not firm, not suggestive, just there, like grounding a wire. Isaac didn't pull away. Her palm was warm, calloused, real. "You keep looking for a trap," she said. "But we're not the trap. The land is. The moment you inherited it, it started rewriting you. That sounds like magic." "It is," he swallowed. "Do you believe in all of this? The pact? The children? The way they talk about me like a seed instead of a person?" Echo looked out at the trees. "I believe in balance. The ridge gives, and the ridge takes. Everything else is just ritual. And what do you want from me?" Her hand tightened ever so slightly around his. "Nothing you don't already feel yourself." A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but thick with implication. For the first time since arriving, Isaac didn't want to run. He didn't want to escape. He wanted answers, and he wanted her. She turned and looked at him again, her voice barely above a whisper. "When you stop trying to control the rhythm, you'll hear the real music." And with that, she stood, walking back toward the house with the same quiet gravity she always carried. He watched her go, and for the first time, he didn't feel lost. He felt chosen. Isaac didn't sleep that night either, but not from fear, not from dread. His body ached with questions. Echo's touch lingered like a thread of static over his skin, and the things she said echoed louder than her name. He lay in the old bed with his eyes open to the ceiling, trying to imagine what it would feel like to stop resisting. The house was silent, yet alive. The kind of silence that breathes around you. He got up when the sun had barely crested the ridge, and found Solveig already in the garden, hands buried to her wrists in a mound of black earth. "You're an early riser," she said without looking up. "I didn't sleep," she smirked. "Good. Means the soil's working its way into you." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just watched her work. She moved with reverence, placing seed pods into the earth like she was setting bones. "Why me?" he asked. Solveig leaned back on her heels, wiping sweat from her brow. "Because the land wanted you. We don't get to argue with that. And what happens if I say no?" She looked at him for a long time, not angry, not even disappointed, just steady. "Then winter comes early." He narrowed his eyes. "That a threat?" "It's a cycle," she said simply. "When the land is fed, it blooms. When it's starved, it devours." Isaac sat on the edge of the wooden frame that lined the garden. "So what, you want 5 babies by spring? That's the deal?" Solveig shook her head. "Not just babies. Legacy. Energy. You're thinking about this like it's a job, like there's a quota, but it's a rhythm. We make life. We feed the ridge. It keeps us alive in return. Everything else is weather." Wren joined them a moment later, carrying a bundle of dried herbs bound with red string. "We've survived 7 winters here. The last 2 were the hardest. Blythe says this one will be worse." "She a psychic now?" "She's a calendar," Wren said, laying the herbs along the fence. "When her bones start to ache, we know frost will come before it should." Blythe herself appeared from the orchard path, wrapped in a shawl the color of ashes. She looked more worn than yesterday, pale-faced, slow-moving. "I've got 3 weeks," she said softly. "Maybe 4. Isaac frowned. "What happens in 4 weeks? Frost takes the ridge. The soil closes. If nothing new roots before then, what?" Blythe met his eyes. "The land sleeps, and it won't wake up for us again." It wasn't hysteria. It wasn't desperation. It was truth spoken by people who had lived with it. Echo appeared at the edge of the path. "You asked why we want children. The answer is, we don't." Isaac turned to her. "We need them," she said. "Not for us. For the land. For the rhythm. For the thing that beats underneath this soil like a second heart." He didn't speak. He couldn't, but part of him had already decided. They didn't ask him again. Not directly. Not with words. Not after that morning in the garden when Blythe said her bones felt the first frost crawling toward the ridge. No one cornered him. No one begged. The sisters simply continued harvesting the last of the herbs, stacking firewood in geometric piles, preparing the land like they'd done it 100 times before, maybe 1,000, and Isaac watched them. Not like a man trapped. Not anymore. Like a man who had been chosen for something that terrified him because it felt right. He found himself helping Solveig in the garden, repairing a wheelbarrow that hadn't rolled straight in years, following Echo's quiet hand signals as she taught him how to read the birdsong just before dusk, listening to Wren explain the layers of a fertility contract as if it were a prayer she'd been reciting since birth. He ate with them now. Every meal. No questions. Just shared silence and glances that meant more than conversation ever could. He found himself sleeping less because sleep felt like missing something, and one evening, without any grand ceremony, without a candle or oath, he walked out to the front porch where all 5 of them were gathered and simply said, "All right." That was all. One word. Solveig froze mid-laugh. Echo slowly lowered the book she'd been reading. Wren raised her eyes from the knitting in her lap and tilted her head. "You're sure?" she asked. "No," Isaac admitted. "But I'm done pretending I know anything better." Mara stood up first. No words, just a nod. Her face was unreadable, but her posture relaxed. Solveig followed, walking to him and placing a hand over his chest, just over his heart, her touch firm and warm. Echo stepped forward, brushing a piece of hair from his face, then leaned in close. "It's not just about children," she whispered. "It's about roots." "I know," he whispered back. Wren finally stood. "Then let's begin." Blythe remained seated, her eyes closed, as if listening to something far beneath them. Then she opened them, and Isaac could swear they were glowing faintly in the dim light. "The land accepts your offer," she said. "The timing will hold." They led him inside, not dragged, not demanded. He followed willingly, the way a man might follow the edge of a dream he finally understands he's been chasing all his life. They took him upstairs. The hallway glowed with soft candlelight, the air thick with jasmine and pine. One door was open, one bed. No one rushed, no one directed. They simply stood around him, present. 5 women, 5 expressions, 5 stories he didn't know yet but would. And then Mara stepped forward and kissed him, not with hunger, with gravity, with meaning. Then Solveig, then Echo, then Wren. Blythe kissed him last, her lips cold at first, then warm as spring. And in that moment, Isaac understood. This wasn't conquest. This wasn't a transaction. This was the land itself reaching through them, choosing him, and pulling him deep into its roots. The snow never came. The map said it should have. The old farmer 2 valleys down had nailed tarps over his tomatoes and boarded his windows by the 2nd week of October. But on the ridge, the air remained warm, heavy with the smell of tilled soil and wildflowers that shouldn't have survived the frost. Isaac stood shirtless in the field, rake in hand, sweat on his brow despite the calendar claiming it was winter. The sun was soft, low, golden, and the earth beneath his feet hummed. Not a metaphor, not a memory, a hum, as if something ancient was stirring just beneath the surface, watching, approving. It had been 2 months since he said yes. He no longer asked questions. Not about the rituals, the calendar that didn't match the one in his phone, the night visits, or the symbols Solveig painted across his chest in mud and ash before the solstice. He had stopped counting time in days. Now, he counted in heartbeats. Echo was the first to tell him. She found him in the garden one morning, her hand resting gently on her stomach, her eyes soft with something like wonder. "The land has accepted," she said. "There's life." He'd nodded, not surprised. Weeks later, Solveig confirmed hers too, dragging his hand to her belly and pressing it flat. "Feel that?" she said. "That's rhythm." Then came Mara, then Blythe, then Wren. 5 sisters. 5 pulses beating beneath skin. The house changed. It softened. The hard lines of survival began to blur into something domestic, something tender. Isaac found himself building new cribs from old oak, sealing drafts in windows that had once been left open to invite spirits. He made repairs without being asked, built furniture from instinct. When he saw a need, his body filled it without thought. At night, they didn't all sleep together. Some nights it was Wren and a book beside the fire. Other nights Echo curled against him and whispered stories of the men who came before but never stayed. Some nights Mara would arrive with muddy hands and no words, just presence. Sometimes Solveig held him so tightly in the dark he could barely breathe. Blythe was different. She rarely slept. But one night, she came to him in silence, sat beside him on the porch, and stared into the stars. "It's working," she whispered. "The ridge is changing." He turned to her. "How do you know?" She pointed to the fields. They were blooming. Poppies, lavender, vines, fruit trees budding out of season. The chickens had laid eggs with speckled blue shells. The spring beneath the house ran clearer than it ever had. The frost never touched the ridge. Isaac understood now he was never meant to inherit land. He was meant to inherit a role, a place, a function in a much older story than he'd ever known existed. 5 women, 1 man, a pact older than laws. He wasn't trapped, he was rooted, and the ridge, once hungry and waiting, now purred. As the sisters rounded the porch that evening, each moving differently, heavier, fuller, glowing, Isaac sat in the rocking chair and smiled. He wasn't afraid anymore. The land had spoken, and it called him father.